Hey, everybody. It's Nancy A. Schenker, also known as the geezerproofer. Why the geezerproofer? Because at any age, you have an option of being a beezer, somebody who be relevant, be active, be curious, be in the moment, or you could be a geezer. And a geezer is somebody who is stuck, who refuses to change, who is really opinionated. And so it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with age. It has more to do with personality. But there is a perception that as we get older, and the perception is partially true, that we sometimes get more geezerly. So my mission in life at the age of 68, woohoo, I just turned 68 on Saturday, is to help more people find their inner beezer, because we all had it in us at one point in our lives, and then along the way, it somehow got lost. In fact, one of my girlfriends told me this week that she likes hanging out with me because I help her find her mojo. So hopefully after listening to me and Wendi today, you will all have a lot more mojo. So my guest today is Wendi Kaplan-Carroll, who I have known for a really, really, really long time. And in another universe, far, far away, she and I worked for the man. Or in this case, it was a woman. It was Gail Goodman, who was the CEO of Constant Contact in the very early days of email marketing. Now I'm going to sound like I am positively ancient, but email marketing was just getting off the ground. Wendi was a senior executive at Constant Contact, and I was recruited in to help be a Constant Contact ambassador, ambassadrix, teaching people the virtues, the do's and don'ts of online email marketing. And Wendi and I then became fast friends, and we used to do presentations together. So this, for me, is like such a schmaltzy, evocative moment to be back on the air with Wendi Kaplan-Carroll. So Wendi, first, why don't you just start out by telling people what you used to do, what you're doing today, and then we're going to dive into, in the words of David Byrne, how did I get here? Like just the transitions that go on in life that lead us to a different place.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me on, by the way. I'm so proud of you. Like, I really, really am. This is amazing. And happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day. We are taping on Valentine's Day.
We are,
so happy
hence the Barbie
Valentine's
pink.
Day to all. That's right. And we love each other so much. So, so I am an entrepreneur now. I have my own business, which I founded a couple years back, and I was almost 60 years old when I founded it, and now I am over 60 years old. I'm actually 63, almost. Couple weeks. But yeah, I started my own business, and I am a marketing consultant. We have a marketing agency. And what I do is I work with small business brands, and I help those brands connect to small businesses. And the truth is, I use a lot of my hints and tips that, we used to do at Constant Contact, partnering with organizations and getting people out there to speak on behalf of these brands that are trying to connect to small businesses. I'm very lucky. I love what I do. And I'm very fortunate to have been able to start a business, at the age of 60. Wow. It's crazy.
That is crazy. And what's also interesting when you were talking about what you do now, and I say this all the time, nothing has fucking changed in the last 40 years. Customer service is still customer service. Communication is still communication. Ad buying, and you started out in radio sales.
I started out in radio, for a long time.
So podcasting is the new radio. So the only thing that really has changed is the technology and the media that we use to communicate, but the basic principles of...
They're all the same.
Yeah, don't be an asshole. Come up with copy and messaging that benefits the end user. Don't spam somebody. In the old days, it was direct mail. Now it's email or texting or frequent messages on LinkedIn. So marketing is marketing is marketing. Good marketing is good marketing.
That's right.
And watching the Super Bowl ads this weekend, I was kvelling, which in Yiddish means like goodness, feeling good in my heart, because most of the celebrities who were in the ads were over 40. In many cases, well over 40.
Sure.
So it's really good to see. And there was a menopause ad before the Super Bowl. So
no vaginal dryness.
Exactly. So we OGs are having a moment. I think I think this will be our year.
Yeah, it's just, it is really crazy to think that we are at this point in life, but yet still feel the way we always felt, right? Like I don't feel any different than I did at 30. Well, maybe a little bit different.
Why would we? I mean, people say to me, you don't look 68. And I'm like, how do you know how 68 is supposed to look in 2024? Like I do look 68.
Absolutely.
This is 68.
This is 68. Yeah. This is 62 and a half, almost 3. You know, my father, let him rest in peace. He died at 91 years old. And on his 90th birthday, he said, I look in the mirror and I still see myself as a young man. And honestly, I didn't understand what he meant until like now. Like I totally get it. Like I still see myself and feel the same bullshit, there's like, you know what I'm saying? Like the same insecurities sometimes pop up. It's like, it doesn't really change that much. You handle it differently, but it's,
So that's actually a great segue because the topic of today's podcast is transitions. And some of those transitions are like, hitting a pothole on the highway and going flying into the median or swerving to avoid a car and flipping over. Things like sudden death or illness of a friend or a parent. You can't really prepare for that. One of my favorite Monty Python quotes is, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. And in a nutshell, that is what life is all about. And as much as we think, okay, my parents are going to die someday, not to be maudlin, but when it actually happens, it is like hitting that pothole or getting hit by the truck.
It is, yeah. You lose your parents, whether they're older or younger, it like really hurts. And I miss my mommy and daddy. They're my mommy and daddy still, right?
Oh, totally,
so it's just, it is really interesting that people, I think, expect that you lose an older parent, you're in your 50s and 60s, they're in their 80s or 90s. It doesn't matter. They lived a full life. Matters a lot.
Oh, it does. I mean, this was, my mom died 2 years ago. And this birthday, I missed her calling me up and singing an off-key version of Happy Birthday. It's just something that, it's a tradition. It's something that carries on. But just to keep things upbeat.
So let's talk positive.
That's a phase of life. But then I knew you when you first brought your daughter home. And now she's away at college.
It's crazy. So I adopted my daughter, and she would probably kill me for talking about this publicly, but it's obvious she's adopted. My daughter is Asian. I am a white Jewish woman. So my husband and I adopted her when she was a little girl, and she's now in college. And it is absurd how quickly time went. Like suddenly my baby is a freshman in college. And that was a crazy transition for me. I did not expect becoming an empty nester, and I mourned her. Like I mourned the loss of like all those years, and it just went by so quickly. And suddenly I had no idea what it means to be an empty nester. I had no idea what it means to be a mom of an 18-year-old, and like just shifting my thinking a little bit. It's been interesting. Now, it's been a couple months. I'm sort of enjoying it, but actually I'm enjoying it a lot. But it was really an interesting transition for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and it's okay to admit to that. I said that the other day. I said, my kids are grown and married and successful. My parents are both gone. I work for myself. So this is the first time in my life where I haven't had to take care of somebody, or with the exception of client work and making a living, I have so much more control than I've ever had in my life, which is another huge upside of getting older. And, especially, we women, the odds are pretty good they're going to live to be 100, which means we have another 30, 40 years left. That's an entire lifetime. We could do whatever we want to do.
It's interesting. The past couple of weeks, my husband has been out of the country. He's visiting. We have family and he's from Australia. I'm married to an Australian. My life is very international. And he's been away, and my daughter's been away in college. And I have literally been by myself for the first time in years, like completely by myself. And I've enjoyed every moment of it.
Are you going out clubbing and smoking weed, or?
You know what? The first weekend, I'm like, woohoo! I had a couple friends over, and it's just been nice to relax. I've been watching The Bachelor. I'm embarrassed to admit.
Don't be.
I'm doing these ridiculous things. It's so funny. And I'm spending time working, but I'm also spending time like taking care of myself and working out whenever I want, and, going out for a nice meal and cooking more, and just kind of relaxing. And there's no pressure, and really enjoying every single moment. It's not a bad thing.
And
at all.
I bought a paper work organizer this year, kind of by accident, but I decided not to return it. Because I thought I was buying a journal, but it ended up being this like giant 8.5 by 11 thing. But I noticed that it has 3 columns for every day. So this week I started dividing up my columns, self-care, passion projects, and work. And every day I have to make sure that there's something in each one of those columns. I often talk about what I call the silver hair playbook, because we as women were raised in an era where we were supposed to be executives, And you and I both did that. I mean, I'm sure when we used to speak back in the day, we wore like business suits and pantyhose. And now, fuck that.
I'm sitting in my house wearing Uggs and,
and you can't see
jeans.
it, but I'm actually wearing like a midriff turtleneck, but I'm keeping my jacket closed.
I forgot those days where we would put pantyhose on, right? And our pumps and our little skirt and our suit jackets and like go to work. I worked in Manhattan. I worked for some major broadcast companies, and I was, all decked out. It was the Sex and the City days. So I was literally living that life. Like it was, bars at night and dinners and
so we knew
really nice shoes.
Yeah, I mean, we knew what we were supposed to do in our 20s. And then in our 30s and 40s, we raised families. And nobody really, it's like a book where somebody tore out the rest of the pages. Nobody really thought about what the women of our generation were supposed to do once the kids left and our parents were gone. It's like, isn't someone going to tell me that I need to go to graduate school or,
Well, Nancy, it's funny because I actually was single in my 20s and 30s. I married at 41, had my daughter in my mid to late 40s. So I was kind of living that life, 40s and 50s. And all of a sudden, I'm in my early 60s and I caught up to everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Okay. She's, certainly she's a bit younger than your girls, but it is really interesting. Like the phases of life. I don't know what it's supposed to be like to be in your 60s. I'm still working and want to be working and want to be contributing to the world.
I know people think it's weird out here in Arizona that I still work at my age, because a lot of, I think especially men, they kind of aspire to be done with their work so that they can then play golf or play tennis or do whatever it was that they didn't have time to do. Whereas I think when women, and again, this is not a scientific study, but women of the 80s who had big careers and raised kids, whether we were in our 30s or our 40s or our 50s, there is that certain sense of relief where I'm like, all right, well, I don't have to do anything anymore. It's both relief and terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because I think back in the last couple years, I think with the pandemic and like everybody in quarantine, I feel like the years have just been kind of this blur. So it's a combination of getting older when the years go faster, plus like these years when we've been like kind of, just at home more. But I'm at this point where I don't really want to go out all the time. And it's not me being a geezer. It's me being a beezer and wanting to enjoy life on my terms.
Exactly.
I don't have to be running around.
Yeah.
I don't have to be schlepping. I don't have to schlep into Manhattan, and schlep, by the way, means schlep, right? How do you explain schlep?
Schlep, it means like drag your ass somewhere.
Drag your ass in.
Yeah.
Drag your tongue.
I know. We're like
Nancy
the Larry
and I get
David,
together,
Jerry Seinfeld of female comics. Like, that's just.
Well, whenever Nancy and I get together, like the Yiddish just starts, like it just kind of comes out.
I know, but
right?
there's nothing like. I did have a guest talking about how to marry a mensch, so we've had a little sprinkling of Yiddishkeit throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
So, I was talking before about like the potholes versus the planned exits. And, I think as we get older, we come to realize that life is a combination of both. Do you find that you've become, you were talking about the pandemic. Do you find that you become more resilient as you've gotten older, or do you get paralyzed by change?
No, I think I've become more resilient. I mean, I definitely change. I've learned to give myself grace, give myself a moment to understand that, okay, my daughter's going away to college and everything's going to change. It's a wonderful thing she's going away and this is all good, but suddenly my role in her life is going to change. And for a moment, I had to just sit down and give myself some grace, because I did have to learn that this was a little bit of a grieving process. I was grieving what was, but I think everything, back to losing, my parents' loss was in the last couple of years. It's just been kind of the last couple of years have been a bit of a roller coaster. And I think I'm resilient. I'm doing specific things to keep myself that way. Every morning I've been meditating, and some of this is going to sound woo-woo, and I'm sorry about it to those that aren't woo-woo, but woo-woo sometimes, very pragmatic woo-woo works.
Pragmatic woo-woo.
But I've been meditating, and it really has made a difference. Like the longer you stick with it, the easier it becomes. So I've been meditating. I do journal every day and kind of keep track of things. And just kind of try to get in touch with my inner self. Like as woo-woo as it sounds, you need to find the methods that work for you to keep moving on. And life is not easy.
No, and the beauty of journaling, because I've been doing it for a while now, is to go back and read where you were a year ago, 6 months ago, because sometimes you forget that you're making progress. Like I find that I don't necessarily get paralyzed by change, but I get anxiety. And it could be as simple as my thinking I'm going out to dinner with a friend, and then at the last minute, they're like, oh, we're not going to go to dinner. We're going to go do this instead. And it all, of course, it depends on what the it is. But I have found that there's certain things that I adjust to immediately and other things where I need to take a beat and process. And I don't think it's gotten easier or harder as I've gotten older. I think it probably was harder because my life was more structured when I was a working mom. That changes in the routine. And I see that now with my older daughter. Like she has to plan her life out because she has 2 little kids and she works. So if all of a sudden I show up, in fact, when I visit her, I stay in a hotel because I don't want to disrupt the routine. Because
100%. Yeah, 100%. My he's in Australia with my stepdaughter and stepson, and they have families, and he's staying somewhere else for that exact reason, right? He doesn't want to disrupt the routine. And, I feel bad, like he can't be with them all the time, but they don't have time for them.
And they may not even want him there all the time. Like,
right. Exactly. It's just, it's funny. And that's just part of like being a mom and watching your kids, being a parent and watching your kids grow and becoming more independent, and everybody's living their own lives.
And I do think it's much more complicated now than it used to be. I mean, in the old days, grandmothers played a particular role in families. They would come over, they would do Sunday dinner, then they'd go home. People would dress up when they came to their relatives' houses, which...
Yeah, why did we do that? I forgot about it. My mother would make me get dressed up to see my grandma.
Yeah, my grandfather would come over wearing a fedora and a suit on a Sunday.
Yeah. So sweet.
Yeah, and remember when you used to try... Now we're really going to sound like to ancient
Yeah.
cities, but people used to dress up to fly, and they could smoke on airplanes. So that's like the
Yeah, I don't remember that as much, I will say. I don't really remember that.
Can you imagine like people wearing suits? Now they wear pajamas on the plane.
Absolutely.
And
I do remember when I was in my 30s and 40s, and when I was single, I did get dressed up because you never knew who you would meet.
exactly.
I once actually got hit on by a male attendant, whatever, an air
Flight
host.
attendant.
I was
right.
like, I'm being hit on by a flight attendant back in the day.
Yes, and there was nobody to complain to back then. You just had to like suck it up and fend for yourself.
Yeah,
because there were no HR
for sure.
departments. There was only personnel.
Yeah, I can't say that I didn't like it, actually. I think I might have liked it.
I know. That's kind of that should be a whole episode unto itself, is have we become too woke as a society where people are paralyzed and they feel like they can't be themselves?
Yeah,
and
it's interesting. I've been to that point. I think you're 100% right. Like, I mean, I'm all for respect and all of that, but I can make some very off-color jokes, and I realize like I can't do that in work situations anymore. Like, fortunately, the team I work with is like, they get it, and they're all over 50. And sometimes we think, oh my God, we would get hauled into HR for the way we're talking.
I know. And I just
other.
hired a college intern, and I did say to him, permission to drop F-bombs. Like, is that going to offend you? Like, I pre-qualified, and he happens to be the son of a friend of mine. So I felt a little bit more comfortable. But I think we're just living in, what can be a very confusing and ambiguous.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good that came out of some of the rules and regulations that were put into place. But then I feel like sometimes it's made people so paranoid about self-editing that it's kind of sucked the fun out of certain things.
Yeah, because like part of my charm was sort of my colorful language at times.
No, we were back when we would present together, we were pretty irreverent and funny. And I do still think there's a place for that in the world. And you just have to know where the line is so that you don't cross it.
Yeah. And look, again, we have to respect one another for sure. Totally. But you got to also have some fun, and you can make fun of each other too.
So what's next for Wendi Kaplan Carroll? What's your next reinvention going to be?
Well, I'm trying to make this one really sustainable. So we're going to keep doing, I do hope to, I want to get back on stage, and I want to talk, I've been doing a lot of webinars, but I want to be in public speaking. So that's like, I really want to have my keynote, and I really want to speak, and I want a podcast. So we'll talk about that.
That's easy peasy. But yeah, the pandemic also like put, a huge stop to that. I had just done my speaker sizzle reel. No sooner did I finally get around to doing it, then the pandemic happened. So nobody's hiring speakers, and a lot of speakers now speak for free. So it's it's a competitive world out there, and you really have to have, in the words of Gypsy Rose Lee in the movie Gypsy, you got to have a gimmick. And
you got to have your shtick.
Yeah. And
was that, you got to have a gimmick? Yeah.
But that's great. And, I'm sure in the years ahead, as I said, I couldn't imagine being a grandmother at some point in my life. And here I am, Nana Nancy. And that's been a whole other adjustment, change, and I've learned some very valuable lessons of do's and don'ts about today's grandmothers. In fact, that's an article that I'm writing for a magazine called Crunchy Tales in March, which is the 5 kinds of grandmothers.
Well, it's also interesting. So my stepdaughter has children, so I'm a step grandmom, and it's sad because I'm not, I haven't seen a lot of the boys, but my sister just recently became a grandmom, and she's having another one, a bubby. She's Bubby. And we were talking about how many women in our generation are grandmoms, but they're not living in the same town as their kids, like you and your daughters, right? It's sort of the long distance relationships. My sister's one daughter's in Hawaii, one is in Florida, and she lives in New Jersey. So it's like, what's the transformation? What does that look like? My sister's like, I am going to continue to live my life And it's going to be different. It's just not the same as when, my mother was 40 minutes away.
And I've had people booby shaming me, saying, well, what, you live in Arizona and your kids live in Maryland? And in fact, my younger daughter said to me, Mom, I think you should stay in Arizona because you'll live longer. The weather is nicer, and I can come east as soon as it thaws out. And I do go back east regularly, but I think she's actually right that she'll also inherit more money because the cost of living here is low.
But there's always that.
And, I live a healthier lifestyle here than I probably would if I lived in New York and was out to dinner every night. But I've structured my life. In fact, I was at a presentation this morning and the Wall Street Journal named Sky Harbor Airport as the #1 airport in the country. And it really is an amazing airport. It's easy in, easy out. And they're going to start direct flights to France in
Paris.
In May.
Springtime in Paris.
I know.
You should go.
I'm planning on going to Europe in the fall. That's like on my list of things to do.
We were there last summer and it was beautiful.
Yeah, I haven't been since.
And so many people, by the way, I don't speak French, but everybody was speaking English, which was really, I was shocked. The last time I was there 20 years ago, everybody, you couldn't speak English. It would be insulting, but I would say that 95% of the people we met spoke English.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I would go to France. It was funny. I was telling somebody that I was watching The Bachelor last night, and I said it was purely for educational purposes. I was trying to figure out where I might want to go for my next European trip. Malta actually looked Malta looked great. Who knew?
Why are we watching The Bachelor? I have no idea. That stupid Golden Bachelor made me want to see what happened to the kid Joey. Now I'm invested.
I know, and it's so awful. And you're watching, and you're like, I'm smarter than this. I'm better than this. So what I've started doing is planning other activities around my Bachelor viewing. So I'm like, I'm folding my laundry for the week. And that's the primary activity. And then I can delude myself
to be on, yes.
that The Bachelor just happens to be on although you and I both know the truth that we wanted to know whether Sydney or Maria got sent home. Like that was.
Yeah, exactly. Bye, Sydney. And we'll see about Maria.
Yes. Bachelor Steve said she makes it to the final 4, but he dumps her after the hometown date. So
good, because I don't know if I like her so much.
No. So I love how we talk about these people. This is another thing that hasn't changed.
I know.
Reality TV is in 2024 what soap operas and Dallas used to be back in the day, where it was like water cooler talk, and there are no more water coolers, they're bevy machines. But it's what people talk about the day after. So again, that's an example of something that hasn't changed
but it just evolves. It looks a little different. Yeah,
exactly.
And I see that you're working from a shared office space now, which is really great. I'm still working from home, and I sort of really miss that camaraderie of talking about what did you watch last night on television.
Yeah, and that has really...
I miss that.
There's a blog that I posted today. My blog is called badgirlgoodbizblog.com. You could find it on my website, which is The On Switch, TheonSwitch. And then I repurpose my blogs on LinkedIn. But I actually wrote about the benefits of being back in a co-working space because I was getting weird.
I read it.
I was getting weird.
It was
working
great.
from my kitchen counter. And I was getting up in the morning. I may or may not go to the gym, but I put my gym clothes on every day. It was wishful thinking. And then 10 o'clock at night, I'd still be in my gym clothes and I hadn't gone out. And so I let my pandemic life kind of ooze into my next life phase. So I'm really forcing myself as a beezer.
Yeah,
to get out.
Yeah, you have to as a beezer. As you recall, I've been working remote since, when I was at Constant Contact in 2008 starting, I started working remote. So being remote is not new to me. The Zooms are new. Like we didn't have Zoom in 2008. I think we just started Google Hang. It was different, but I was traveling and I was out a lot.
Yeah, there were more structured activities. So they would say, okay, you're making a presentation at the library on this day. And so you would get dressed in your pantyhose and go to that place and see other people. So
Yeah, for sure. But I think as someone in our age group, if you are sort of like either working from home or maybe you're retired, having a routine, even if you don't have a big day planned, getting up, getting dressed, putting your makeup on, putting jewelry on, work, whatever it is, have that routine. I get up every morning between 5:30 and 6. Now the dogs have to go out, so that's part of the reason, but it really has set my routine and I like it. I do my meditation, I work out, and I take time to put makeup on and just put something on, and have that routine, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, I just started that again last week when I went into the co-work into Industrious, and it's been a game changer. It's that and recording the podcast, which I started back in October, just having that structure, having that community around you, I think will help you age. And I think we age well. And I think, we as women, not all women, but many of us are social beings. And so we need that. That's like the stimulation, the shot of adrenaline that we need.
100%. Yeah.
Plus you learn.
I need my people. I need the energy of human beings, right?
And you learn stuff when you talk to people. Like we're not the smartest, I'd like to think we're the smartest people in the room, but we're not. Yeah,
I'm definitely not the smartest, but I can talk. And I really do enjoy having conversation. And that is definitely, when my parents moved into assisted living, as bummed as I was for them, because they were socializing way more. It was awesome. And I realized in my own life, as I age, I really want to make sure I have a community and I have social and friends and conversation. It's really important.
And the right kind of community. Like last night, I was invited to an event and I checked it out on Facebook and I saw who was going. And I'm like, well, I think it's going to make me feel old. And tonight I'm going to a Valentine's Day party at a club called the Churchill with trance music. It's, it'll be a whole different experience and it'll help keep me young, just hanging out with people who are not of my generation.
That's awesome. And that's like one thing I love about there's a lot I love about being this age. But the big thing is like, I don't have to do what I don't want to do. Like I can pick the stuff that makes me feel good. Right.
Yeah. And I've adopted this new philosophy. I call it the bye-bye philosophy, that if I walk into a place and it's not my jam, either I
bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. And I just slip out, don't even say, sometimes I'll say bye-bye if there are people there who I know, and otherwise I'll just bye-bye. And
I wish my younger self knew that. Like that's the one lesson.
Oh yeah.
I wish I could tell my younger self, right? If you ask, what was one lesson? You don't have to do what you don't want to do. Like you don't have to feel so obligated.
Right, exactly. But
it's okay to say no.
There was also a lot of pressure back then, I think, to live a certain life and do certain things. And now it's much, I think there's more value placed on happiness than there was back then. The focus was on money and status and keeping up with.
We never got mental health days, and I certainly could have used one.
Oh, yeah. No, by the time I retired from corporate life, my last corporate job, I would give myself a PTO day. And when I first, got out, years had gone by, and someone said, like, PTO. I'm like, what is PTO? It's like, it's personal time off. I'm like, that's a thing now. That's great. Like I was doing it before it was a thing. I just didn't tell anybody that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to lose my shit if I don't take a day off and go shopping and do my errands. And I kind of learned how to do that.
And, I even think about how much I like stress if my daughter missed a class or and I'm like, it's, what, at the end of the day, it's this, thinking, I don't know what she's doing in college, but in high school, I obviously, if she was like out a day, I would stress. And now I'm thinking the kid didn't feel well. And what am I stressing about? She graduated. She did great. Like I put so much emphasis on like a moment, right? Like you just give yourself some grace.
And
give yourself some grace.
And that's a great way to end. That will be the mantra. Give yourself grace. I'll have to build that into the description of.
I never really said that before, so I I practiced it, but I'm glad to share that. So
Cool. All right. So how can people reach you, Wendi, if they'd like to take advantage of your marketing consulting services?
you can reach me at wendi@sq-biz.com. Or find me on LinkedIn. It's Kaplan with a C, Carol with 2 R's and 2 L's, and Wendi with an I. Always misspelled.
And then I will also, put that in the description of the podcast itself, which you can, obviously, if you're listening, you've found us somehow. But every new episode of The Geezer Proofer is up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The episodes are also uploaded to both Vimeo and YouTube if you want to see our lovely faces, or at least just see what we look like and run away in horror.
Yes.
But I think we both look pretty good today. And yeah, I hope you will continue listening. And as I said before we even logged on, I would love to have you as a guest again, riffing on some other topic.
Oh my gosh.
Or maybe one
If you can't tell, we love talking.
Yes.
Like literally, we're just having a conversation.
I know. And maybe one day you will be the other geezer proofer and we can have a third guest on the podcast. And that would be Sisters in Podcasting.
I love it. Podcasting is fantastic. It's bravo to this medium and congratulations to you.
And I resisted for so long. And then Brian Howie, who owns Pod Populi, said, you need to have a podcast. And I was like, well, I don't really need to have a podcast. Who really listens to podcasts? And I started doing some research on the statistics, and the number of podcasts is still escalating. Somebody told me the other day they were disappointed that my podcasts are only a half an hour, that they would listen to me for an hour. So I'm like, oh, well, that's...
Yeah, they are fantastic. I listen to so many podcasts and I've become like so connected to these podcasters. Follow them now on social. Yeah, it's just... It's what is it called? A parasocial relationship. And it's cool. I think it's fantastic. I learned so much. And I also just laugh too with some of the podcasts. Is great
because it's like eavesdropping on, two girlfriends' conversation in a restaurant.
Yes.
So,
well, it's so good to see you. Nancy and I actually have not seen each other in several years, right? In person.
At least,
it's been
we
a while.
Follow each other on social media and we call and we text, but that's like a whole other thing is that, at the end of the day, making new friends when you're in your 50s and 60s is really, really hard. But when you reconnect with people who you've had shared experiences with, like occasionally in my memories, my photo albums, like a picture will pop up of an event that you did at the Copacabana.
Yeah. And there's also the one of us with the telephones.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know that picture.
I know. I feel like we're like inside joking here and everybody else is on the inside.
We're totally inside joking. Okay. You have to connect with us and we'll tell you the joke.
Exactly.
But
so
I would love to join you again. Thank you. And happy birthday and happy Valentine's Day. Lots of love to you.
Thank you. And I just encourage all of you in your lives, whether you're 20, whether you're 100, be a beezer and not a geezer, and continue listening as we talk about how to be a badass after 50, sex, tech, and life. Peace out.